This episode is brought to you by the future. Oatly had experts look into the future, which is totally possible, by the way, and then report back about what things will taste like when we get there. Learn about bold ideas, the dawn of decaf, and the rise of fiber in the Future of Taste report on Oatly.com. All right, welcome back to the Coffee Show, everyone. Special treat for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Someone who's been on my hit list for a very long time. I've been waiting for this one. Mr.
Absolutely.
Andrew Kelly of Smallbatch Coffee Roasters in North Melbourne, Australia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, Kirk.
Just real quickly, before we get into it, you were just saying something before I hit record that I found really interesting, which is when you were 31 years old, you started Auction Rooms, which is now like a bit of an institution in Melbourne. So it was previously, started by you in using Smallbatch coffee. And you said to me that you're 31 and it's at that age where you've got the workload and you've got kind of the drive, but you've also got the delusion. Explain why you choose the word delusion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many things would not happen without it. It's the key thing, right? You've got all of this youthful arrogance. You've got a mission to change the world, and you're just blind to all of the pitfalls and the barriers and things that make it hard. And you feel like it. Certainly, I did back then. That your energy would just be endless, and you can just overcome or steamroll whatever obstacle you come across. Yeah, so delusion. That's what I'm calling now in retrospect, delusion.
What delusion were you sort of concocting back then that you think survived the test of time to now?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, some of my delusion has been shed just recently over the last few years. I think energy levels start to decline fundamentally at some point. But I still think if you believe in what you're doing and if you have a clear concept, that that kind of conviction that you convey in your daily life and in your business concepts will come through and will be read by customers. So
do you say yes to a little too much? Or when you were younger, did you say yes to a little too much?
I did.
Because this is the lesson I'm coming to learn, is that like I said yes to far too much last year, and running a business, opening a second shop soon, doing this podcast, traveling for it. It's like, I breached limits, and we were talking just down while we were having a coffee before about missing my partner's birthday, missing our anniversary, and and how I just feel horrible for it in hindsight. But anyway, delusion and overworking yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. I think back then as well, there was so much that was just seemed like ripe for improvement as well. So that was a big part of my we can fix this. Yeah.
Tell us for those who don't know you, what is Smallbatch coffee?
Sure. So I would say that Smallbatch was an offshoot out of Auction Rooms, and we were born, if you like, in 2010. We realized that having a roasting machine in the inside of a cafe seemed like a great idea at the time, but
instant sales.
Absolutely, yeah. But the practicalities of green coffee storage, of roasted coffee storage, of packing space, QC space, and let alone the noise and all of that, just made it impossible to do well in the cafe space. So we leased a warehouse down the road from Auction Rooms in 2010, I think it was, and moved the roaster out promptly. I think Smallbatch, though, for me, is defined more by it being the tip of the iceberg of the sourcing work that we do. We realized in 2011, 12, when we first started buying green coffee, that the level of green coffee in Australia at the time was so low in terms of the range was low, the depth of knowledge about it was low. You often couldn't find what you wanted across the different countries. Freshness was just, I don't know, the crop year was barely published on offer lists back then. You had three kind of old school importers working in Australia at the time, really. And now, of course, it's more like 100 different importers working in Australia. So anyway, that was the thing that defined Smallbatch back in the day, was green coffee sourcing that we did ourselves and the sense of smallness.
It's interesting you say that, because there's 3 or 4 roasters roasters that come to mind that have kind of put sourcing as like their number one philosophy in Melbourne. And I would sort of put into that category yourselves. So Smallbatch, 7 Seeds, excellent buying program.
Sure.
Market Lane and by extension Melbourne Coffee Merchants,
Yes.
who I buy a little bit of coffee from.
Sure.
And then Proud Mary as well. Like just these businesses that have the founders are just hugely obsessed with sourcing. So why is sourcing so important to you? So obviously you were talking about freshness and those other things, but like why is some businesses I feel like prioritize brewing, efficiency, customer service, like e-commerce, whatever.
Yeah.
But for you and like I think those others that I mentioned, like sourcing seems to be like the number one priority.
Yeah. So for us, for sure, I think it comes partly from an obsession with food also, and food provenance and food sovereignty. It didn't, I must admit though, I didn't start with a clear sense of like the awareness of the problem to fix. But as we started to travel to origin, we saw countless examples, certainly a few key examples back in the early days, where producers, where we told producers what we'd paid for a coffee and we asked them what they received for the coffee from the exporter. And there was just major discrepancies between those numbers. And so that was one thing. It was like a fairness thing, and are producers getting paid what we are told they're getting paid? The second thing was this, like the food thing I said, an obsession with sustainability of agriculture and like truly understanding how what you're eating, consuming in this case, is grown. One of the phrases that was used increasingly in Colombia and where we are the deepest with our sourcing practices is clean agriculture and or growing coffee as part of an agroforestry system. And basically, in a nutshell, you can either grow coffee in a healthy way or you can grow coffee in a volume way. And yeah, we would prefer not to support bad agriculture. We certainly don't want to support deforestation practices. And we want coffee to be part of an ecosystem that's healthy.
Yeah. I'm curious when you talk about that, there's some regulations that are coming out of the EU that kind of require compliance for coffee producers or pretty much anyone selling to the EU produce, that I guess they need to guarantee they're not, they need to prove they're not clearing forest or whatever to do that. And while the intentions of that sound pretty great and, conceptually, I think, there's many people have good sort of thoughts with that.
Yeah.
It's not really as easy. It's not quite the same story for the producers on the ground.
Yeah.
And, you and I hazard to guess, are people that love to, we love to want to improve the environment and it's an absolutely important thing, especially if you're a good citizen of the coffee industry. But what's like some of the difficulties around that, if you can explain?
Yeah, sure. So you're right. As the legislation stands at the moment, it appears that the onus of the extra amount of work will be on producers, and they are the people who are often least able to, have the resources because of technology or, I don't know, many reasons, I suppose. It is going to be hard to make sure that the people who can afford to put the work in on this are the ones who absorb the work on this. But you can see that the implementation of the legislation has been delayed now twice, and it's also going to be rolled out in a very intended to be a sympathetic manner.
Is it even possible? Because the EU is such a big consumption market, like very high consumption economy, if you think of it collectively.
Yeah.
Is it even possible? Like, because, we're talking about coffee. What about like cacao or cocoa or soybeans or whatever? Like, is it possible?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's super, super difficult. Initially, the importers are going to be the people who have to do a lot of work on this. The importers are then going to lean on the exporters. The exporters are then going to lean on the producers. So it's one of these things that keeps getting kind of kicked down the line, if you like, up the supply chain. I honestly don't know. I think it's going to need a lot of technology to do it well. And I think you're going to find people who, the better resource people can get around the hurdles, if you like, or can demonstrate the right things. But the average producer in Colombia, for example, with 2 hectares of coffee, who hasn't removed a tree in their life, they're going to have to jump through all of these hoops, which for sure is going to be a big barrier to them. Yeah, don't know.
I think a theme of today is obviously going to be a lot about sourcing and why that's important. And
Great.
I think we have a pretty good discourse within the coffee industry of why it's important, to have those values and what the outcome is of doing that, because we're better. Well, not only are you improving people's lives, you're also kind of guaranteeing your supply chain. Not guarantee, but there's no such thing as guarantees in the coffee industry. But like you're strengthening your supply chains. There's many reasons why you should do it as a business or as an industry. But I'm curious to know, like, why should consumers care? Why should someone come into my shop care? Because I think we live in a world where, a lot of people people get lectured a lot these days. And that's why I feel that's why we struggle to sort of get that message across, right? But why should the common consumer care about ethically sourced coffee and paying that little bit more?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. So firstly, I would say for the same reason that they should care about whether their meat and eggs are free range, whether their vegetables have spray, and whether their fruit has pesticides. It's the same thing. Coffee is, after all, something that comes from the soil and you put in your mouth. So ideally, it would be a healthy thing. Secondly, ideally, it would be something that isn't continuing to be exploitative. Obviously, coffee has a very colonial history. And most of the producers who are presently working in coffee did not choose to be coffee producers. They're coffee producers by default of no other options. And so the reason why consumers should care is because we hope that they care about everything that gets put in your mouth and everything that's contributing to the environment in which we live and the supply chain that you choose to support.
Yeah, and I think it's super important that we kind of, sharpen the pencil here on how we kind of deliver this message.
Yes.
Because I think collectively as an industry, we've failed miserably. And it's like wine hasn't had that same issue. I guess that's got like a different element of prestige where, coffee kind of seems like a necessity and a human right, whereas wine's got that sort of luxury appeal about it. But, the interesting, I guess, dichotomy there is that wine's grown in a lot of developed countries, whereas coffee's grown in developing countries. And perhaps there's a unintentional or unrecognized stigma that we have of, kind of expecting cheap goods from these developing countries.
Yeah, well said.
Would you agree or disagree with that?
No, I 100% agree with that. We do have an expectation that things are cheap because they come from overseas because of, wage costs being lower or land being cheaper or whatever. And also we just don't care. We just don't know. We're ignorant. And like people would never willingly, for example, like perpetuate a system where their own children had no opportunities economically other than to continue on the coffee farm. They wouldn't allow that for themselves, but that is exactly what we perpetuate with most of the practices that we follow in our coffee consumption.
I would say though, it's not an intentional thing by most consumers, right?
No,
I think, lack of awareness.
Yep.
I'd probably put a lot of that down to. And we were talking a little bit before, like people in Australia are struggling to pay their bills. And in developed countries, like it's, wealth inequalities, growing quite drastically here as well. So like,
certainly.
And, I would say the people aren't aware of that. And also I think if they were, their thoughts would be drastically different.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. So the coffee industry also has played into this. We've been talking for years now since we became specialty about cup quality and direct sourcing, but we've never talked about quality of agriculture and we've never talked about fairness in a really direct sense of buying from a producer who you value as an artisan. So back to that wine example, there are very few producers who, and there are, you could name them on, 50 in the world, if you like, who have a name for themselves, who are in control of their production, who know what they want to produce for themselves. And for sure, they're responsive to the market's desires. But for the grand majority of producers in the world, they don't know what the market wants. They're told a lot of misinformation about how to produce that in terms of, whether they plant Castillo or whether they maintain their heirloom varietals. So you have this again perpetuation of ignorance, if you like, and lack of opportunity. And for sure, consumers don't know that. I would just like to say though that we as an industry have played into that with a focus on the tastes of bananas and strawberries. Even though I don't know what else we do, the wine industry has the beautiful benefit of being able to say organic practices. And for sure, it's a luxury good that people are willing to suspend their price consciousness for a while. Yeah.
And, coffee needs to hire the matcha PR guy. Really? Because my matcha supplier.
I love that, yeah.
My matcha just went up 50% in price, right?
Yeah.
And I put my price up at the store and I had a notice there and I introduced a new size so that it's like there's a more affordable option and stuff like that. No one said anything.
Yep.
Not one person said one thing. Because there's news articles all over the world saying, matcha's in high demand.
Yeah.
And people just can't get enough of it. Whenever I put my coffee price, it is such a headache. But the matcha, no one cares.
Yeah.
Like it's totally acceptable. Like, but the perception of coffee is just different. So coffee needs to hire the matcha PR guy.
Yep, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Collectively, we'll get there. So what's it like you, considering what we've discussed up until now, I think some important context here is that you spend quite a lot of the year overseas at Coffee Origin, and you have done for the better part of nearly 20 years now, let's just say. So how many months of the year do you spend in 3, 4?
Yeah, it's up to 3. I think it was 8 trips to Colombia during 25 and 2, 3 to Guatemala, 2 or 3 to Ethiopia.
Wow.
And they're like, they're generally an average of 2 weeks each.
And these are relationships you formed over many years?
Absolutely. So 2015 was when we really started to get deep into Colombia. It started, I was a Cup of Excellence juror in Pasto in Nariño in 2010. That was my first really deep origin experience, if you like. And it was there that I started to meet people who helped shape what happened since 15 years. But things really started to ramp up in Colombia when we got our own export license. And we'd worked for years with using another milling company's export license. And we had to go through the difficulties of transferring pesos to Colombia and then figuring out how to make sure the producers were paid. And then ultimately we realized it was much better if we did this. We had our own accountant, our own business entity, and our own export license. And so that happened in 2015. And since then, there's probably about 50 small producers that we work with in Colombia. And we have worked with, it's probably more like 60 or 65 now, but a good 40 of them have been with us since 2015, 16.
And I'm curious to know, let's use that as the benchmark, 2015.
Sure.
From 2015 to 2026, where we are now, what are some of the changes you've seen at those farms over those 11 years, where from day one to now, what's the impact of the relationship in terms of development, but for the families, the quality of the farm, all of it?
Yeah, sure. So I've got 5 case studies I could give. We'll go with Jorge Rojas. He's in Tolima. Tolima back then, 2015, was a place that buyers still didn't travel to. It was still considered was still more of a FARC vulnerable place. And, you were encouraged not to drive at night. You were encouraged to always be in convoys, if you like.
Is that because of danger of guerrillas?
Guerrilla activities, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And so I never personally felt in danger, but nonetheless, that was the specter of the situation there. And so Roland, and we met Jorge Rojas, who was working in a cooperative at the time in Planadas, and he was a 1 or 2 year old. He had sold his first lot to the organic cooperative in Planadas called Asopep. He was working on his mother's farm. He had no idea what a specialty coffee lot was. He just randomly had to pick the cherries when he did and fermented them as he did. And the normal place that he was going to sell his coffee to was closed because of some circumstance at the time. And he randomly went to this other place to sell his coffee. They assessed the cup and found it amazing. And that was then a year later or 6 months later how we met Jorge. Roll on to now. Jorge manages about 15 different farms. He has his own central, meaning a place where he's able to process all the cherries that he buys, or not buys, that he produces, and also the farms that he's working with deliver their cherries there. He exports to 4 countries. he is completely in charge of his processing styles and cups his coffee, knows what he wants to produce. So there's one great example. You've gone from a young man who really didn't know what specialty coffee was to now being completely master of his own domain.
And as well, so that, I guess, like employs other people in the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's like you were talking about, like good quality agriculture before, or what was the term you used?
Yeah, like clean agriculture.
Clean agriculture.
Yeah.
Does he embrace this approach?
He does. Yeah, he's a great producer. Yeah. So, and it's like, it's choosing to use the right inputs, of course. And you can buy organic fertilizer, you can mix it with conventional fertilizer. It's having the right shade trees. It's having some, in a lot of cases, we've seen producers alternate their rows between avocado, for example, and even banana trees or plantains or whatever they want to produce, yucca, within the tree, within the plantation to make it more sustainable and less monocultural. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's great in that respect too.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's something that just came to mind is that I actually bought. We've got a coffee on the bar now, so when you leave, we'll go have one. It's we source it from Common Folk Coffee, who have a program in Uganda called the Kookaburra.
For sure, I have heard of it. Yes, absolutely.
And they've just uplifted the lives of so many people.
yeah.
And there's a gentleman by the name of David Flood, Irish fella living here in Melbourne, and he won a Brewers Cup competition using coffee from the Kookaburra. Just wiped the floor with all these people using, Panama coffee and all this sort of thing. And it was incredible.
Great story.
A great story. And they've really documented how that's improved people's lives over there. And,
Sure.
David doing that was pretty impactful as well. So
Yeah.
it's tremendous to hear these examples.
And there are so many now, thank God. Yes. There's three or four other producers who I kind of could single out. Many producers have gone from like needing to sell wet coffee, meaning
Cherry?
not sometimes in some cases cherry, but more commonly in Colombia they'll sell parchment that isn't dry yet, and this is just like the fastest way to sell it and to get cash. And you've got people who have been asking for loans or needing loans in order to be able to hold the coffee for us to be able to purchase it at a later point. And now roll on, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is, and they're able to hold their coffee. They're able to improve their infrastructure. In some cases, there wasn't an indoor toilet, and they've been able to improve their houses. One producer like Herman in recent months, we saw that he's been able to construct 2 apartments next door or residences next door to his own residence. So you have this feeling that producers are not only able to improve their infrastructure of processing, but they're also able to have options in life. They're able to send their kids to schools.
It gives them some agency and some autonomy.
100%.
And if we relate that to the listener listening to this or watching this right now, right? Imagine being stuck in a job that you just hate, but you need to pay the bills and you've got no other option. You have to go to work.
Absolutely.
You don't get vacations as much as you'd like to. You can't go wherever you want to, when you want to. You can't do what you want to do. You can't buy your kid that present. You can't take your girlfriend out for dinner or to see a movie. And what you're talking about is giving someone that agency, giving them that autonomy, and then uplifting a community as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love to hear that, and this is why it's so important. This is why I crow on about it so much. So I really applaud the work that roasters like yourself do, Andrew, and I just think this is something that we need to discuss better with people, have a better dialogue with our customers about, because I do think people care.
For sure.
But I think we as an industry, we've probably been a bit prone to being lectury in the past.
Yep.
And, I just think the way we sell it, like there's whether or not something's right kind of isn't relevant. It's like delivering the message in a certain way so it's perceivable is kind of, to me, that's what's important. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We have been way too lectury. You've got a 10-second opportunity to convey something meaningful about a coffee or about how you serve something, and we need to get really, really good at that and say what's meaningful for sure. Yeah.
And does the coffee get better year on year for a lot of your stuff as well? Because one of the examples I gave is who you just mentioned, Herman. Is his surname Ortiz?
Yeah, it is.
Herman Ortiz.
Yeah.
And every single year, that is now the release from Smallbatch that I probably look forward to the most. It is just so good. he makes this pink bourbon coffee that it's a wash, but it tastes like a natural. It's like, it's unbelievable. So like, what's it like quality-wise seeing these coffees evolve over the years?
Yeah, so it's been enormous. The one group that we work so significantly with in Colombia is called Los Watcheros. And Herman is a socio, a member of that. And we've seen every single one of the 24 producers that are members of that group improve their quality over these years. And sometimes it's through planting new varietals. They're very actively aware of like, Bourbon Ají or Pink Bourbon. And there's Ombligon and Papayo and et cetera. So some of it's through that, planting the newer, sexier varietals. But it's also just through very cautious improvements in infrastructure. So there's anaerobic fermentations or fermentations in sealed plastic food-grade drums. And there's fermentations in cherry that happen beforehand. But there's intentionality that follows each of these steps now. Back in the day, producers always thought, in my experience, that more hours of fermentation was always better. And roasters back then or buyers were saying, we want the stinkiest, funkiest, weirdest, craziest stuff. And a lot of the times we were working with producers to scale back to a more suave, a more calmer kind of fermentation that still had all the clean notes that we prize. But yeah, what we've seen over the last 5-7 years with these small producers is that they're now like understanding how to produce what they themselves also like to drink. Back in the day, producers never consumed their own coffee. They were having the rubbish that was left over that couldn't be exported. Now roll on to where we are in this last 5 years, we've seen people really actually be able to brew a V60 themselves even. It's crazy.
It's interesting you say that because a good friend of mine, Carlos Escobar. Do you know Carlos?
I do.
He's started a brand
Diferente
in Colombia. Pretty much, yeah, like what you're saying, prioritizing selling Colombian coffees to Colombians.
Yeah, wonderful.
Building a domestic industry.
Yes.
And how good for them because they produce it. It's so fresh. You can move it within the country so easily and get it roasted. So it must just be like heaven drinking it over there.
I've really loved to see what Carlos has done. And he does typify or exemplify a big change that's gone in Colombia in the last 5 years.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy. And if you're listening to this for the first time, I would recommend you watch Carlos Escobar's Brewers Cup performance this year. It's one of the best you'll ever see. Tell me about, I want to talk a bit more about Smallbatch. So when you started in 2008, did you say?
2010, really.
2010.
Yeah.
So that's, yes, you've been going a good 16 years now. So when you started in 2010, what does Smallbatch look like then? And what does it look like in 2026?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just checking that my thing, sometimes the memory card corrupts and I lose all the files. So.
Oh, sure. Is it working good?
All right, cool. Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Wow. So actually, I'll start with something quite weird. We are still roasting on the same roasting machine we started on. And so that's a thing that looks the same. And you could say, why on earth are we doing that? It's a very convective roasting environment that we really love. It's a perforated drum roaster, and we roast 13 kilos of espresso coffees at a time and 12 kilo batches of filter coffees. We've loved having the control over that roaster and maintaining that small batch size, which, it hasn't been a way of sticking to our namesake, but it has been how it turned out by preference. So that's one thing that stayed the same. What is completely different now? So back then we were buying, Cafe Imports had just started in Australia importing coffee. In fact, it was Mark Dunder from Seven Seeds who, if I remember correctly, brought in the first kind of pallets from Cafe Imports from the US. So this was, prior to the days of direct dispatch. This was coffees from the US coming to Australia on mixed pallets. So that kind of typified the kind of quality that was available to roasters back then. Roll on to maybe 5 years after that, so 2015, Smallbatch was buying from Panama, Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, Ethiopia, Colombia, of course. We had a real plethora of different origins that we worked in. And then a few years later, we started to hone down our buying practices and ditched all the other countries, to focus on Guatemala, Colombia, and Ethiopia. And now, from 2016, we have basically been buying coffee only that we have ourselves paid for directly with and working with producers that we've been working with since then.
And for that must be like a hard thing to get started, right? Because like obviously the cash flow element, you've got to buy a lot of this coffee up front. Like if you're able to explain, how did you go about? Did you have to borrow money to make that happen?
For sure.
You have to? Was that something you saved? Like how did that happen?
So I'll take a slightly different way to answer that question. It was bloody mindedness that led to this.
Was this going back to the delusion?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So back then, so little was known about how to store coffee well after it was produced and dried. There was no grain pro storage of parchment coffee, and there was, in fact, in one super sad example, some of our coffee was shipped from origin in Ute, just in plain Hessian bags without grain pro. So this is the kind of thing we were having to, the obstacles, if you like, and the learning curve that we had back then, we set for ourselves. How to export well, how to actually store coffee well after it's been finished at a producer's farm, and then how to mill coffee. And then that's the practicalities of quality preservation, if you like. But then we're also trying to figure out what kind of fermentation regimes we liked, which coffees didn't end up becoming baggy, prematurely baggy, obviously. And Colombia was what's the word, renowned for that back in the day. 2015, people thought you got 6 months out of a Colombian coffee after it was imported, and it would go baggy. For those who don't know what that means, obviously the flavors become like rancid and
hollow and papery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kirk. Yeah. And so figuring out what fermentation regimes we like, and then the biggest learning curve of all was to figure out what prices were fair for producers. And this is something we weren't top down in. We were having a conversation, trying to understand conditions of production, what a livelihood cost, what represented a good livelihood, and that is a journey that will never end, to be honest. It's really complicated to figure out the cost of production, for example, and depends on so many things. You're not sure over how many years you should amortize fixed costs, and if you plant new varietals every 5 years, how do you account for the 2 years while you don't have productivity on your farm? Anyway, and man, I think I listed so many things there. Even I feel like each of them needs a chapter on their own.
Well, we could go for hours, Andrew Kelly, if you let it, but we'll stay on task. So
yeah. But
all of that contributes to you got to finance this.
Yes.
Over.
So that was the thing that the delusion, as you say. So what we also realized is that for a producer, a small scale producer who generally hasn't had experience in selling to the outside, generally they don't know which roast to roast their coffee. It may get blended, it may get, who knows what happens to it. They just sell to the local buying point. The local buying point pays cash. Or sometimes they take 2 weeks to pay. The prices they offer aren't great necessarily, but the cash is right there. Sometimes they'll buy wet coffee as well. Like I said before, parchment isn't fully dry. So cash flow is everything, both for small producers and for us as a small exporter importer. And it was brutal. There were times where there was no money. All of auction rooms, takings at the time, all of Smallbatch's incoming resources at the time were already pre-committed to producers who needed coffee during the harvest. So let's just say Herman, for example, back in the day, his main harvest would be in November. In August, we would often be financing him some money so that he could pay pickers, so that he could pay fertilizer. The fertilizer is more like April or something. But also, and most importantly, so that he could afford to hold that coffee until we attend Colombia, taste the coffee and make an offer to buy it. So we're paying for the coffee, or loaning a lot of money toward the coffee in July, let's just say. And the coffee doesn't arrive into Australia until February, let's say. So you have this really long cycle. And then, of course, you don't sell the coffee immediately when it arrives in February. You're roasting that coffee over a 6 to 12 month period in many cases. So the cash flow requirements are enormous.
So you risked it all to be able to pay producers in advance and fairly.
For sure. Many times over.
Many times over.
Yeah.
And what are some of the emotions you're going through at the time when you're doing that?
Yeah. So Again, delusion.
Because I've definitely had moments in my business where I've just like, in the last 2 years, like if something doesn't fall right into place, like I could lose it all.
Yeah, there have been moments like that for sure. Like this time when 60 bags of a Guatemalan coffee that we'd labored over so greatly to buy well ended up being shipped without Grain Pro, and then was baggy 3 months later. So definitely there, and there have been many examples. One of the most, delightful but also frustrating origins with which to work is Ethiopia. There's such an enormous amount of excellent coffee there, but the difficulties of securing that coffee and bringing it into your country of destination are enormous. And
what are those difficulties?
They change every year. One of the things which I absolutely love and respect in so many ways is that the Ethiopian National Bank stipulates a minimum sales price for the coffee from Ethiopia. So, and it's separated by grade, if you like, by region, by whether the exporter is working in a vertical integration model or whether they're a cooperative or whether they're a commercial operator. And so each of these different grades, type of operating and regions have different minimum stipulated sales prices. And these prices are really high. And this is coming from someone who has always valued the producer receiving the most that they can, possibly receive. But yeah, the cost of these minimum contracts versus or weighed up against the risk that you'll actually get what you're buying exported ultimately within a timely fashion. It's a really hard trade-off to manage.
Can I ask? Yeah. I don't know if you perhaps know the answer to this question, but why has Ethiopian coffee? Why has the flavor of Ethiopian coffee changed so much in the last few years? Because pre-COVID, for example, I mean, I used to get an Ethiopian natural, and just by default, it always just had this like blueberry or big berry flavor. And I haven't had that in quite a long time. Like washed feels like it tastes more or less the same or similar, but the naturals, like I don't get it. Like what? Sure. Why don't they taste the same?
Yeah, so I don't have like full optics on that, but one thing that we observed back 3 or 4 years ago was that there was a lot of really heavy anaerobic style fermentations happening with Ethiopian coffees for naturals. So they were previously what we'd call a traditional natural was produced. You select the cherries really carefully. In many cases, you don't wash them. You're just literally putting them out on the beds. And then over the period of 3 or 4 weeks or 4 to 5 weeks of them drying, the workers are selecting based on how the cherries look. So you end up with a pretty manually selected coffee, but it has no fermentation in water. It has no water sourcing. It's just, relies on the quality of the selection. Then, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of experimentation with anaerobic processes, whether they were in bags, whether they're in drums, whether they're underwater, and then they were put out to dry. So essentially a different type of natural production than was typical and traditional. And that, from my point of view, was a way of responding to what they thought the market wanted back then.
See, I just want them to reverse that decision. You know what I mean? Like yes. I miss those, and it's similar with Kenya. I know Kenya's got some different sort of challenges that they work with as well. And, I'm not here to tell anyone how to produce coffee. I'm just saying I miss it.
Yeah, totally. We share this. One of the frustrations I would say with Ethiopian coffee too is that the coffee exists. Even back 3 or 4, 5 years ago, it was there. The great coffee, the coffee that we all love. It's there. It's just. You would need to buy 20 containers of coffee from one exporter, if you like, or to work there very constantly in order to have all of the coffees you wanted represented and delivered actually in the containers that you export.
Yeah. It's just, I miss it so much. The other, and I still get excellent coffee from Ethiopia, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And Kenya as well, although I do, albeit, find less,
sure.
But there's still excellent coffee there. But how do you feel like the industry? You've been in the industry for a while. You're a vet now. How do you feel like the industry's changed since you first entered to now as well? Like I'm so interested to hear this perspective.
So one of the biggest changes now is that there are so many players. There are so many coffee shops. There are so many coffee roasters, and of course this is a great thing. And it's great for consumers to have all of this choice. I'd say one of the things that we haven't, on the other hand, managed to do is make clear to consumers how a coffee should taste and how fairly or well it's been sourced. So that's one of the changes, a plethora of players, but still confusion in some cases for consumers. We've bamboozled them firstly back 10 years ago with different brewing methods, whether it was siphon or, we bamboozled them with stuff about rest dates that were required or flavors that came from certain origins. And so that's reduced a little bit over the period, but we've also continued to, complicate things for consumers. Yeah. So the other changes that I see, though, are that these days you can buy great coffee as a roaster from a number of importers. And so you can kind of get whatever you want. But what lacks, I think, these days is that there's the narrative of why you offer a certain coffee to your customers is a little bit hollower, So you end up offering things based on how well you think they'll sell or whether you particularly like that cup profile. But do consumers understand that, I suppose, is my question. Yeah.
One thing that we were actually discussing before we walked up here is I guess people take for granted how good we've got it in Melbourne in terms of the quality of hospitality. And there's a influencer that I'm friends with. His name's Bangin' Sangers. He walks around, he goes to places rating sandwiches, quite popular now. Anyway, he just took a trip to the UK and he was explaining how basically in Australia you've got a respectable, drinkable, quite good coffee shop on almost every block. Yeah. And then not quite the case in the UK. It was his saying. I had some good coffee in the UK, but it's not as easy to find as here, for sure. And I guess like if you're listening to this from Melbourne, you don't really know, like, I think it takes traveling to realize how good the Melbourne coffee and food scene really is. Like, you miss having a good coffee so accessible when you travel. And surprisingly, it's so much cheaper here as well to get a good quality coffee. And then as well, like, I mean, I've got a bit of a blasting hot take for you, Andrew. The food scene's really good here as well. Like, the food is equal to the coffee. I think Melbourne makes better pizza than Italy. I'm just saying, like, I know, but let me explain. So I think in terms of like craftsmanship, we're just as good here. The dough is just as good here. Where the Italians probably have us is like the quality of the ingredients that they put on top. I mean, it's definitely better there. Sure. And they do I'm not saying we do pasta. I'm not saying we do they do so many things better than Australia. Sure. Like, they're Italians. But I just think they do pizza better. I'm sorry. I think Melbourne pizza is better than the entire country of Italy.
What's your take on gelato? Comparatively.
I don't think I sampled it enough over there, to be honest. But I mean, honestly, I think Melbourne would be just as good. But it's not because of like what the craftsmanship and stuff like that. It's because of the quality of dairy that we have here. Australia has world-class dairy, and nothing can ever take that away from us. It's we have some of the best produce in terms of food on the entire planet. Yeah. And you're a well-traveled guy. You know this, but like, I've got friends that moved here from all sorts of countries, and like, just taking a bite of something here is just so much more pleasurable because, and I worked in selling dairy products for a few years, and I can tell you, like, the farming, the level of care that is applied there, the professionalism, Australia's just got some of the best produce in the world. And it's for those reasons why, we probably do make the best gelato in the world. Maybe. I don't know. Italians are going to kill me for this, but
it's true though. We do have a high level across everything these days. Yeah. And for sure that's exemplified in coffee. It's exemplified in the sandwiches. It's panettone. The whole bakery culture of Melbourne, the viennoiserie side of things has gone crazy.
But it's like, it's our national, like, I guess, export, or not export, it's our national skill. You know what I mean? Like, sure. We're probably known across the world for exporting minerals and mining and all that sort of stuff. But the thing that we're best at in the world is like hospitality and, making food and coffee and things like that. And people travel from all over the world to come and learn how people in Melbourne do it. And that's what I love as well. Like, and they go back to their country, they make an Aussie style cafe, and it's spreading like, a metastasizing cancer across the world. It's just it's something we've got to give ourselves a pat on the back for. Australia, you're great at making coffee.
Absolutely. I mean, we see this every day as well with, I don't know, you can call them pastry tourists or coffee tourists. There are a lot of people who travel for what Melbourne produces from a hospitality and food point of view and coffee point of view. And thank God for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen the lines of people coming for a tiramisu croissant at what was that like, actually? Because I remember walking past Smallbatch a couple of times and I saw this great big line. I thought, oh boy, no thanks.
Yeah.
I'll just keep going because, sorry, Andrew, the line was just a bit too long.
Yeah.
But like, is it kind of bizarre when something just goes mega viral on
Yes.
Instagram and then you just can't keep up with production?
Yeah, it's crazy. And look, we would much rather the slow burn, the sustainable daily level of trade than the episodic crazy red book inundation. Yeah, for sure. It's crazy. I mean, and this is one of the things we do celebrate, that people can get so excited, and the novelty, right? Like that that many people can care to line up, to pre-order, to spend a lot of money. Yeah, and on the other hand, we deliver in spades. That product has hand-pulled espresso. It has 4 different components that go inside the shell of the pastry, the pastry itself, the mascarpone. It has grated or coarsely ground coffee particles throughout it as well. It's really next level in terms of the level of care that has gone into everything that has. And for sure, it's a bargain when you think about it from that point of view.
Yeah.
The viral thing though, we would like, if only things that we served every day, like your batch brew was a viral, had viral capacities as well.
And it's interesting you say that. It makes me think of something else, whereas like most of a coffee shop's sales occur in like a 2-hour window.
Sure.
Out of like 8 or 10 hours. So, most of the sales happen at one point in time. So like you have to staff it for that. And I think that's kind of one of the challenges of coffee for cafes, I guess, because wages and labor is the biggest expense in a coffee business.
Sure.
And so like, regulating that's really hard. I kind of had this theory that we should designate sort of times for certain offices and businesses to go to work. For example,
give people a roster.
But it's not really anything to do with coffee. It's like to do with infrastructure, right?
Sure.
Do we need to build all these big, expensive roads that private companies toll, to handle like a surge that again happens within like a 2-hour window at the start of the day and a 2-hour window at the end of the day?
Yes.
What if we regulated it so people went to work at different times, and then we didn't need to build all this different like expensive infrastructure? We didn't like congest our cities all at the same time. I just think we need to kind of rethink that, because like
the congestion tax idea of London, for example. Yeah.
I don't know. Like I don't want to add a new tax. Like I really don't want a new tax.
Yeah.
Just regulate when people go to work a bit better.
Yeah.
And say for example, this block, the King Street block, you all start work at 8 a.m. Sorry. And then the next block, you start work at 9 a.m.
Yep.
The next one, 10. And then you go home at different times as well. And so there's not as much stress on, the city, the infrastructure and all that sort of thing. I don't know.
Kirk, that's a utopian idea. You could be onto something there.
Yeah, but maybe
I like it.
People might listen to this and think, oh, it's a bit 1984. But like, I don't know. Just like, I kind of feel like, as a taxpayer, if you're not spending, like we just built this Westgate tunnel or whatever it is, right? Tens of billions of dollars, so much over budget. Would we have needed to as a community if we kind of, just went to work at a different time?
Totally.
And then you wouldn't have to sit in traffic as long as well?
No, I'm on the same page on this. Yeah, we have a very much road-driven lobby, it seems. And anyways, yes. I also like the idea of a cafe that turns into a bar in the evening, perhaps with a different operator, because you're halving rents then in that case. And it would complicate fit outs, but for sure, this sharing of resources and diversion of peak times, for sure.
I've got to get on my Karen for a little bit longer before we finish it on a positive.
Please.
No, I did warn you that I would bring this up in the podcast, and that is that I don't think that the Australian federal government, state government, or municipal governments are pro-business at all. And we're like, I'm not one of those guys. You see those people on Instagram that are like, move to Bali, your life will increase, no taxes. Move to Dubai. If you want to move to Dubai, like 9 months of the year, it's 40 degrees plus. Everything's expensive as all hell. If you want to go there and avoid the tax, be my guest. but I'm staying here. And then, Bali as well. Like, I love the people and stuff, but, being stuck with a horde of Australians is not my idea of a holiday.
Nope.
And then, but I just think the governments here don't support businesses. And what they just take the tax that we raise and just do what they want with it. And, I don't think it's well spent most of the time. Why should we care? Like, I think starting a business and employing people is one of the most altruistic things you can do for your community and for your country, because you're raising revenue in the form of taxes, which go on to fund people's healthcare, fund people's roads, fund people's welfare if they need it. And I just don't think that the government really. It's not that it should be rewarded, because we all need to play our part in a society, right? But I think they could make it a little bit easier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't think any government at any level in Australia is pro-business, and it's important that they are for the sake of the country and for the sake of our communities. Because it's not like you and me are rolling in cash, right? We've got bills to pay. But we employ people.
Yeah.
We rate 10% of everything we sell goes to the government. And, then you think of the employees that we employ that go on and spend their money, 10% of what they spend, they go and get accommodation and spend it at other places. And, this is how we support communities. So I just kind of feel like businesses need to be looked at a bit more fondly. Like it's a bit of a treasure for a community. And, we as founders, one day, maybe we'll get a good reward for it. Right. But a lot of the time it's you eat stress for breakfast is the reality.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
you're funding all these things. And, I think the respectful thing to do for a government is to kind of encourage more growth in a business. And you gave the example of, can you explain the gas thing again?
So we needed a very pathetic increase in our gas supply capacity, or our flow rate at the roasting facility, because we have a new roaster that we're going to install. And Victoria, uniquely out of the states, now enables the asset providers, the people who provide the pipeline and the meter themselves, to charge the going rate, which in my case is $6,500 to have this 10% increase in gas flow, essentially a new meter. And yeah, that I don't know, is a huge hit, obviously. Yeah.
And it's not just the money as well, right? They made you wait a long time.
It's an 8-month wait.
8-month wait. So 8-month wait for you to grow your business, for you to make more money, increase your capacity, sell more things. Obviously that's good for you, but there's more GST and revenue involved in that. And this is exactly what I mean. Yeah. That should not happen. It should be expedited, because governments and organizations like this should be pro-growth. All you want to do is grow your business, employ more people, buy more coffee from producers overseas, which inevitably raises more tax revenue for the government to go and spend.
Yeah,
and it's just pathetic that they make you wait 8 months to grow your business. I'm here, I'm ready, I've got my money. What have I got to do, man? What have I got to do? 8-month wait, $6,000, here you go.
We see so much support of big business and so little support of small business. And it's the small businesses, especially hospitality, if you like, that provide energy in a city, that provide tourism benefits. The attraction, literally, of population growth as well is part because of the great environment that exists here from a lifestyle point of view. And for sure, it's this is the thing about hospitality, I would say specifically as well. People consistently, fundamentally, and forever have undervalued what it takes to put something great on a plate or in a cup. And people who run these businesses often do so on a burnout model. They only get their cash back when they sell their business, if they can, which obviously you can't do at times like global crises like COVID. And so it's a fundamentally a burnout model, and people it's not valued sufficiently what attention to detail, what skill level, and what care it takes to provide hospitality.
Yeah, and I just think whether you're a construction business, coffee business, welding business, whatever, manufacturing, I just don't think that we're not being encouraged to do better, to grow, which is ultimately an amazing thing for the country, for the community, for everyone.
Yeah.
So, and I just think it's pretty appalling that the lack of care from the Australian government. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a world leader that I can name, although when I've been overseas to places like, I feel like in Dubai, they really care about their enterprise. Obviously there's financial incentive to that. And, and that's why they attract people from countries like here in the UK. It seems like, I mean, if you wanted to, stroke yourself and go to Dubai, be my guest, but like, I'm not doing it. But I just think, we should be encouraging those things because, again, it funds our services.
Yes.
It, keeps people employed. It, makes the country more interesting, because we've got things to do. And anyway, that's my Karen rant.
So many flow-on benefits from vibrant small business support. I agree.
Yeah, and like I'm pro pay tax. Like
for sure.
I'm not saying you want to try and minimize it as a business because you got expenses, but like being a citizen of a country, being a member of this community, and paying your tax is important because it goes on to fund other things. I'm pro that. Just let us grow our businesses, help it be easier, and we will do our part to support the country.
100%.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Support small entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it just like you look at the US, for example, there's many things that, people judge the US for, but like it seemingly is very pro-business, and that's why they've got all these tech companies that are doing tremendously well.
Yeah.
And look, they're the biggest economy in the world, and a lot of people want to move there to go and open their businesses and be a part of that market. So anyway, I could speak about this for absolutely hours. When are you going to open that second store of yours?
Well,
because there's a beautiful site sitting there on Little Lonsdale Street, right. And I've been eyeing it off for a long time. When's it opening? Come on.
Okay, so it's definitely this year, and that was meant to get a chuckle because I've been saying it's opening in April for the last 3 years.
Chuckler for you at home, please.
April this year. That's the plan. We now have no more excuses. We had construction across the road. 2 major skyscrapers went up and one like literally next door to us on Bennett's Lane. So the construction is now finished. Competing hospitality tenancies are about to open up in the laneway across from us. It's kind of like it's got to happen now and it will happen now.
I'm looking forward to it. I want my small batch in the city because this has been going on before COVID.
Yes.
I remember working with a guy one time. He said, I'm going to go be the manager at the new Smallbatch store. And this is before COVID-19.
Is that Luke?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I was like, oh, God, I only just thought of that this morning. Long time ago, Andrew.
So this is what happens when you spend, 16 weeks overseas each year as well. I'm afraid that at every time of every one of these trips has somehow, led to a loss of momentum as well in working on this. But yeah, we will get there. It's promised. Melbourne?
Before we wrap up, I want to know who are some of, you're someone I've looked up to in coffee for a long time, right?
Thank you very much.
We've sent each other a few texts over the years, but I've been wanting this interview for a long time. I think I've asked you a couple of times. And,
Glad to be here.
And so, people like yourself, Mark Dundon, I could go on. These are people I look up to in coffee. Who are people you look up to in coffee?
Yeah. Okay. So look, there's definitely a couple of names, but before I say the names, I'm going to just drag it out a moment longer and say I want to give a shout out to the hundreds of origin-based people who have chosen to do Qs, Q processings, CVA courses to learn how to sample, roast, and cup, who may come from their family farms but have bettered themselves through learning, through upskilling and being able to figure out how to reach the outside world. They may have learned English. There's so many people with such deep expertise, and they're nameless in the sense that I can tell you some names, but the names will be meaningless. There are hundreds. There are hundreds in Colombia alone, in Guatemala, in all of the Central American countries, in all of the African, in everywhere. So kudos to those people who just quietly gain all of this expertise and do the work. I'm a big fan of just rewarding and recognizing the daily work that's involved, whether it's in hospitality or in coffee production. Some names though. So one person who I'd like to shout out to is Mike Malmo, who runs a business called Addis Exporter in Addis. And he is a beautiful man. He runs a very transparent business. Another is Isaiah Shees.
From America?
Yes.
I know Isaiah.
So I met him at probably 2009.
Bring that microphone a bit closer to you, yeah.
Yeah, I met Isaiah in 2009 at an SCA. I think it was probably my first SCA. And he and I have maintained a friendship since then. Love what he does. And Kyle Bellinger, the owner alongside with Jose Hadia of Acito Coffee. Kyle is someone who works very transparently, articulates extremely well on their Instagram and in their communications to customers. But yeah, I would go back and say every single Origin person who has deeply over years gained expertise.
I love that. And, I totally hear your point about these people that devote their whole life to something, just improving that one little thing. They don't always get the recognition they deserve. So, I totally appreciate that. It's a very, very good shout out. I love that from you, Andrew. I don't think I briefed you on this about one more question before I ask you the final question. Okay. So I want you to consider in the back of your mind, I want all the guests to start asking me a question at the end.
Oh, cool.
Cook on that for a minute.
Yep,
but while you're waiting, are you pessimistic or are you optimistic for the future of the coffee industry?
Yes. So I'd say cautiously optimistic. And I know that's a very safe answer to give. So coffee prices are high. They've been now high for 18 months or something, which means coffee producers are obviously not relying so much on people like me that they used to rely on, because now the standard price is so much higher. However, so too have costs of production increase, labor is increasingly scarce, climate is increasingly making it complicated to pick ripe cherries. So there's going to be a kind of requirement for more technology, whether it's cherry sorting machines or various processing infrastructure that will still enable us to gain the same quality that we used to have. So fertilizer costs are also high. So you've got this like optimism on the one hand for producers, but then you've got the reality also on the other. And again, whether you're a coffee producer or whether you're a barista or a chef, the daily struggle is real. How do you daily maintain the focus that you need to maintain on the things that require your own hands to do? Your eyes, your hands, your care, your love, your expertise. So I'm optimistic, but also we need to keep our energy. We need to reward, respect the small things done well on a daily basis.
I love that. I think I'm more or less optimistic as well, because and what encourages me is that I guess consumers' thoughts and perceptions of coffee, I've noticed is changing quite a lot. And that's reflected in the demand for coffee globally. It's ballooned.
For sure.
It's boomed.
Yep.
And so I'm very buoyed by that. I'm very optimistic. I heard someone, Lisa Farr, who has Map It Forward, I think it's called.
Yes.
She put out she had a podcast or something, a post saying that there might only be 20 harvests of coffee left in the world. And, without having researched it or anything, I find that hard to believe, but, it's not inconceivable at the same time.
Sure.
Is that something that has crossed your mind? Or?
Yeah. So, okay, that's another aspect of, I'd say that moves me into pessimism. I'm not as pessimistic as that, but so we've already seen, coffee can be grown well at 1,500 meters. It's just really much more prone generally to pests. And therefore, you need to control those pests. You control those pests through organic or whatever means, or through chemical means. So it's a quality of agriculture impact. But certainly we've seen land at 2,200 meters that previously was too cold to grow coffee on is now perfect to grow coffee on. So there's a flight up the mountain, and you're eventually going to run out of space. Damn mountains peak. They have reducing space as you go higher. And of course, if there's forest on that mountain, we don't support the forest being cleared either. So for a while, there's still land that was used for ranching that can be turned into coffee production, for example, in Colombia and Ecuador and wherever. So there is going to be more altitude that we can go through. And coffee production will continue at the lower altitudes, just with more intervention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know where that leaves us.
We'll see. We'll see. But we'll wrap it up in a moment here. But did you have a question for me, Andrew?
I have a question for you, Kirk.
Hit me.
I would like to know, what coffees are you most excited about? What coffees are you most excited about serving?
Serving. That's a really great question. I like to think I'm very ambivalent with coffee, and I really don't discriminate. So down at our shop, we sell co-ferments. We sell, like the coffee that I made you, the Ecuadorian, really
delicious.
clean.
Yep.
And I think one of the best things about coffee is that there's so many different varieties. It comes in so many different flavors, shapes, sizes, and that's probably the part about it that really excites me. I see a lot of value in, we spoke about someone like Hermano teas, right? Over the years I've dabbled in drinking, Panama Geisha and all these like wonderful, truly mind-boggling coffees. But sometimes you just get a coffee like that where they've just really nailed everything over the years and just worked on their craft and becoming such a good farmer.
Yes.
And it just delivers every time. It's like, well, that's like a 90-point experience without the 90-point price tag.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love things like that. But yeah, coffees like that really excite me because I drink it all.
Yep.
Flat white, espresso, filter. And, that's probably sort of, I guess, some people, they only drink filter coffee. And, while I appreciate that, it's kind of like, man, I'm glad I'm not like that because I love my flat white. I love my espresso. I love my filter. And so, what coffees really excite me? Look, if I've got a gun pointed to my head or like I'm getting sentenced to death tomorrow, like a washed geisha is the last coffee I'm having. But all coffees excite me, Andrew.
Yep.
All coffees excite me.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I'd put myself in the same category for sure, drinking across all methods.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. And look, thank you so much for coming on. This has been one I've been waiting for. What a special treat for you, ladies and gentlemen. What a special treat you guys get. Andrew Kelly from Smallbatch Coffee Roasters has been on the coffee show and you get to listen to it for free. For free, they get it, Andrew. Can you believe it?
Amazing, Kirk. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And while I say for free, I do get sponsors. So, I rely on my sponsors. So thank you to Oatly, whose ads will have played a few times already, to Time Law. Time Law always supporting and they sell really affordable brew gear as well. That's world quality, world class. I've got my guy, Alex, who just competed in the Brewers Cup, used pretty much everything Time Law. And then, of course, we've got Barista Group, who supply machinery to coffee businesses in Australia. I'm opening up a venue very soon. Barista Group is very important to that. So if you need, to modernize your bar setup, if you need to get some good equipment, call Joe and Yosh, the team at Barista Group. So baristagroup.com.au. They're the importers for Uber Milk. Do you use Uber Milk at your shop?
No,
man, you've got to get on
mine went off.
You'll need one for the city store.
Yeah.
But we're going to get the Uber Milk Plus, which will be the first in Melbourne. So it does like 4 different milks.
I've been watching that.
Absolute game changer for coffee. So if you need any of those things, you should absolutely get them. I'll put you in touch with Barista Group if you need, Andrew.
Cheers.
Absolutely. Thanks so much again for accepting the invitation. Take the time out of your day. Good luck for your trip on Thursday.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
There's lots to talk about yet, and let's hope we can do it again.
Oh, we will definitely be doing it again. But thanks to everyone for listening, and thank you again for coming on. We'll leave it there, folks. Hooroo. You can either listen to the third Oatly ad of the day about how you can go to oatly.com and find recipes for the amazing drinks, or read the Future of Taste report. It's from the future. Or learn about the sustainability work. Or you can press the 15-sec forward button on your pod playing device. It's totally up to you.